My question is, I'm just trying to understand exactly the Negroes that are considered to be the descendants of the so-called slaves of America. Is the governmental system in which we're under now, or the colonizers, or the people that claim to own these beings? Do they consider them still property of their purchase? And this is why it's like they feel like they own these beings, and that if these beings decide that they no longer want to participate or be part of this governmental enslavement, like generation after generation, and the confusion when I think about when I was a young person and I would hear stories about prisoners of war. And, the biggest one story was the Nelson Mandela. And I really couldn't understand why someone would be in prison for speaking a truth or trying to help people, have a better life. Or so at this point, I'm kind of trying to understand why, we have these moments of fear when it comes to us wanting to, when I say us, I identify myself as a Negro, born in America. And I say, deep inside, you're like, well, what's the problem?
All right. Yeah, sorry.
And that we have a governmental system, and that United Nations is not involved in helping free innocent people and protecting the average person who wants to identify with their ancestral line and claim their identity. Because I believe they all know the United Nations and the government, and they have records of who these people are, right? And that just by the concept of them claiming that they classified these people as Negroes on their birth certificate, that should be, in a way, the proof, first of all, that,
Okay, let me answer the question, please. Cause
okay, sorry.
I hear you. And okay, first of all, you're not a Negro. And you're right. When you are classified as such, you do not have any rights. And this is even in the Constitution, right? So you don't have any rights. This is why it's taken a while, because you have to, first of all, teach people. The closest thing to being recognized as having some sort of rights, even though, excuse me, in this day and time, they don't even really honor and respect the Moors, right? Because there were actually treaties signed that distinguished what they would call Moors from what they call the Negro or the slaves, as you say. So yes, the Negro, this is why we don't identify with that, and it's going to take time for people to recognize and say, we're Musbatu. Now, you can say that, and someone who's never heard of that or doesn't understand or understand what that means, they won't identify with it. So we have to go through the process of going back to what is recognized and known by the masses, which would be we're from what they consider or labeled as Africa. So the Africans, which would be the original people on the planet, by way of any type of method you want to use, whether it's historical, whether it's anthropology, whether it's, DNA, whatever type of method you'd like to use to establish who are the indigenous people on the planet, not just in America, because this is another trick. How can you discover something that's already there and already exists? So Musbatu, to get to Musbatu, which we say today, okay, let me walk you through it. So we would go, okay, we identify with Africa, but really the original people there were Pataites who became known as newborns, right? And that word newborns is where the word Nubian came from, which then some of those people just literally walked across to what you're calling America today, south or north, where there was a Mexim, all right, or Atlan, Utla, which became Atlantis, with the Greeks adding the tis at the end of Atlan. And from those original people, they were then identified on the American side when the continental drift took place, where those who remain on the side of what we call Africa, which has many, many names, original name was Ganawa, they then separated with those that became known as the Olmecs on the other side. And even when you said America, that's dealing with when the Emirs, because people had to start sailing over when the gap was too big. And then you had the Chinese under Husheng, on the Shang dynasty, who came over and mixed with the Olmecs to produce what you're calling today, which would be really, the term should be Native Americans and not American Indians, going back to those original Africans or the descendants of the Olmecs. I'm saying that to say that when you try to walk people through and say from Africa, which was really a name that was coined by the Arabs from the word Afrikia or Faraka, which literally means to divide, because it goes back to the Berlin Conference and certain things where they literally chopped up and divided Africa and shared it amongst themselves based on the resources that were there, like the gold, the platinum, the silver, the cobalt, this and that. Anyway, going from that, you say newborns became Nubians, and we were identified as Nuwapians, which is the common name. It was like the master teacher brought and made the word Nubian popular in America, so everybody started to use that. But really that is tying into Nuwapian or Sabian when we start to go, okay, how did we arrive in Africa? Then we tie back to the what people call Egyptians, but we're really dealing with the original Pataites, pre-dynastic, who tie into the what we call the Orion and the Sirius star constellations where they came from. That person's gonna have to hold for a minute because I want to get through this here. So when you tie back, okay, we know that we're not just from this planet. We come from outside the planet in terms of our origins and our ancestors known as the Palantharu, which is separate from the Anunnaki, which a lot of people are starting to find out much more about today. However, those beings resided in what people call Africa today. So depending on how far back you want to go, because we actually predate everyone on the planet, every religion on the planet. We even predate, this might sound crazy to some people, the moon and the stars, okay? But anyway, I'm saying that to say that we are now tying right back to who we really are as Musbatu or Sabians, Sabians or Nuwapians. And that's who you really are by being indigenous on the planet. So as a retained sovereign nation, you don't really have to prove anything. You can prove who you are as the original people on the planet, and I'm talking about anywhere on the planet. So that question about being a Negro and are you still a slave? Yes, you are. Do you have any rights under the, go back and read the Constitution, read, you're not. Our brother Umar Johnson and certain other people, they explain this very well, being Americans themselves. And yeah, so the best thing I could say to you, sister, is find your way to Musbatu and to Wu-Sabat as a Musbatu or as a Sabians, and then you get to really know, what's going on and what our mission. Oh yeah, the other point I wanted to touch on, you spoke about the fear. Yes, people like Mandela or certain people who were fighting against oppression, and during that, even the 60s with the civil rights movements, which was really based on the leaders. Although they meant well, a lot of them didn't have the full information of being indigenous and being who they are, to the point where their origins or what they used to tie in was always religion or some type of what's the word I'm looking for? Some kind of activist role where it would be met with violence. And obviously, at that point, they were looking for who's going to be the person or the one that can actually liberate, us as a people. And of course, bring about peace to humanity. And every leader that popped up during that time, to them was a threat. They set up things like COINTELPRO, which was to look for things like the Black Messiah, for example. And so people like Mandela, and Mandela was actually lobotomized whilst he was doing time. So by the time he came out, he wasn't the same person. And that goes into a whole different situation. But yes, this is why anybody that doesn't follow what they consider to be, being a Negro, because even movements like AWCP, if I'm remembering the acronym right, but the NACCP, I'm talking about the Negro movement with people like Al Sharpton. I might look it up whilst we're, yeah, that's it, right? Those movements, a lot of those, if you look at the leaders of a lot of those movements, they're what people will consider today mulattoes or Uncle Toms, if you want to use that word. They're people that they didn't really, they said, yes, sir, how high shall I jump? 10 bags full, sir. They just like, until this day, any leader who is not really, a puppet, that like the master teacher, Pana Babyanon, he's always stood for truth and he's still standing for truth. He doesn't, stand for injustice. But yeah, there are a lot of things that are taking place right now. I heard, of course, again with the new president, that he's going to get rid of celebrating Martin Luther King's Day, Black History Month, these kind of things. So these are things that, should be of concern. And so we're just here focusing on Wu-Sabat, teaching the truth, uniting everybody, basically trying to bring world peace and deal with our liberation as a people. And that's what Wu-Sabat is here to do for anyone who's really about that. So, we just teach the truth, and that's it. And you can do your own research as well. Just because we teach doesn't mean that you just leave everything to us. Oh yeah, the point I wanted to touch on, the fear. We're living in a day and time because, as you say, things are changing. The planet's changing. Mother Nature's changing. It's time, the time we're in is called the sun cycle, 9 ether. It's a rejuvenation and a resurrection of a consciousness that anyone who's really vibrating on that frequency will resonate with, and that's what it is. So yeah, all right, I hope that's answered the question. And if you're not already in our Telegram group, please look in the chat, join our Telegram group, because the conversation continues. And by you joining, you're helping us to reach more people. And so, yeah, look in the chat. The Telegram link has been posted. Okay, let's take the next caller.